My name is Lakia Wilson. I'm the school counselor here at Spain. Good morning. I have been here 19 years. I love it here. I love the staff. I love the students and the families that we serve. I consider myself a fixture in this community, and I want my building for these children. I want my babies to have the best.
This is my daughter's first year here at Spain. I really love the teachers. I did not know that Detroit Public Schools was in such bad condition. I heard about something with mold that they have. I never saw their gym, so I didn't know, of course, that it was in such bad condition.
So up until 2 months ago, our students were here playing in this gym, and then we were told we could no longer use this portion of the building, so it is now off limits to us. We're seeing damage from the roof where it's raining and snowing right inside of the school. And it's created these large humps in the floor, literally, where students were in here playing 2 months ago with the warped floor.
Not being able to go to gym, and that's not right.
It's not right. How does that make you feel?
Sad.
And now they hate gym because they can't come in here and use any of the equipment. All they're limited to is walking the halls. Okay, this is our band room. Our band teacher was laid off about 2 years ago, and our room has been empty ever since. Our instruments are locked away and uniforms just hanging. The performing arts program with no performing arts teachers is an oxymoron. I don't know why when things go away within this district that they're not replaced. And it's just getting sad.
We're in the easel up. Normally we have our reading lesson in the back, but because they did that $2 shoddy cover up on that pipe, I'm still scared to go back there. And I teach first grade, and I don't have reading books.
Now they don't bring books home, you know, and everything is Xerox copies. They're little kids, they don't take great notes. So without books, it's a problem for the parents to help.
We don't have any ink, so a lot of times I have to do this at home. It takes a lot of my preparation time, and we only have 2 preps a week, and it's totally unfair. Our kids love to learn, they're eager to learn, and they deserve better.
No one will take accountability for what's going on with this steam. There's steam coming up onto our playground, and the temperatures have reached 110 degrees. It's a snowstorm in Detroit, and the ground is burning. The students are very sad about not being able to go out to the playground. The fact that they are not able to properly burn off their energy as far as running around and just being free for a few minutes and coming back and getting back to activities.
I blame the emergency manager, the governor, because there shouldn't be no reason why these schools should be falling apart like they are.
The conditions that our students have to face every day coming to our school is unfortunate.
It's the reality of it. Now, you base this versus the schools in the suburbs, there's no comparison.
Even though the governor and the legislators in Lansing are making laws against us, you have a right to deserve and demand better.
Who taught us to fight for our equal rights? Dr. Martin Luther King taught us that we should be treated how?
We should be treated how all people are treated.
The state of education. Are we doing right by our children? Group 7, Shelley Allred, Clarissa D'Agostino, Hannah Dorff, Melanie Garfield, and Kathleen Kelleher. Perception equals reality. Or does it? When we think about education, what first comes to mind? The lack of funding, lack of resources, statistics about poor test scores. What is the truth? We have heard many anecdotal stories of lack of resources, from students having to bring in their own paper and pencils to schools not having enough desks for the students. We've also heard of many stories about the pay being so low for teachers they can't make ends meet, hence they're protesting in the streets. How as a society are we not completely outraged by such inequalities? If we look at aggregate statistics, we may appear to be doing just fine. But how can we truly understand if we are doing right by all of our children if the metrics are so unclear? Funding. The cold hard numbers. The US spent $11,000 per elementary student in 2010 and $12,000 per high school student. The US looks great compared to other developed nations. Switzerland is one of the only nations that outspends the US per student at $14,922. Mexico, on the other hand, averages about $2,993. The average of these developed nations is about $9,313 per student. So the US at approximately $11,000 per student looks pretty great, right? Funding, a closer look. There are 14,000 school districts in the US, and some of these school districts do have a major money problem. Most of the funding for schools is sourced locally through state and local taxes. This results in tremendous differences in school funding. Some schools benefit from large corporations and industries. Others are in affluent neighborhoods. Only 8.3% of the US education money actually comes from the federal government. Hitting close to home, Utah schools spend $7,084 per student, while New York is spending upwards of $17,000 per student. Check out this map. It breaks down the spend per student by county. Specifically, Utah is looking pretty red, unfortunately. That red is about $5,000 per student. If you look at New York, they're far in the green, spending upwards, again, of $15,000 per student. This illustrates that as an average, as an entire nation, we do all right. But there's very, very specific regional areas that are suffering from not enough funding per student at their schools.
Students in areas of high poverty receive $1,000 to $2,000 less in funding than their counterparts. Because students in poverty are more likely to need early education programs, counselors, English language training, or other additional school resources, these schools are not receiving adequate funding and end up selling their student population short. These school districts will need at least 40% more funding to cover these services, but studies have shown that even increasing funds per child by 10% per year over elementary and secondary school years gives these children a better chance at continuing their education, earning more as adults, and reducing the chance that they will still be in poverty. A solution to this problem is to equitably distribute funds to children across all districts so that those with additional or special needs gets the resources they need, like good teachers and supplies. The average salary for public school teachers in 2015 and 2016 was $58,000, but in places like Arizona, a teacher could average $47,000 per year, or in Philadelphia, where a teacher could earn $660 a week, or roughly $34,000 per year, after taxes and health insurance. Following the recession in 2008, many states enacted pay freezes for teachers. Fast forward to 2018, and some areas have brought salary levels back to what they were or near enough. Teachers with bachelor's and master's degrees are earning less than other degreed Americans while taking on more responsibility with less resources. Classes are getting larger as salaries have gotten smaller or remained flat. In recent news, following teacher strikes in Los Angeles, we learned some class sizes were in excess of 40 students per teacher. In environments like this, how can a teacher realistically provide each and every student with the attention that they need? Teachers are seeking better pay, better benefits, and more resources for their classrooms. In a study conducted by the Washington, D.C. Board of Education for school years 2014 through 2018, teacher turnover was at 25% compared to the national average of 16%. Here in Utah, the average turnover rate for teachers in public schools from 2013 to 2015 was 18%. In some cases, there are fast-track programs for those interested in becoming a teacher. There are teaching fellowships in major cities like New York City, New Orleans, and Las Vegas that have programs that place those looking for career changes into teaching by pairing candidates with mentors or coaches while obtaining firsthand experience in the classroom. Certain programs are also providing master's level education courses at local colleges while the candidates are being trained. Unfortunately, in other cases, schools have filled in gaps with unqualified teachers.
From what we can see in this graph is that not even the top state for payroll per employee is averaging over $60,000 for their teachers. It also shows that some states are averaging well above the expected wages for that education level, while other states are exceedingly lower than the expected wages. This is one of the biggest reasons we don't have enough teachers, which in turn is causing the class sizes to increase every year. It is very difficult to pay teachers enough when there just isn't the funding in the school to do so. The problem we see with averages, though, are that they tend to hide bigger issues. Even though it may appear that the U.S. pays decent wages and provides well enough for our schools, it is a huge misconception. By having funding for schools being provided locally, it causes rich areas to receive more funding for their schools, where impoverished areas are continuing to be dramatically underfunded. These two extremes end up averaging out and misleading people when they look at how much funding there is for education. There needs to be a subsidization for those schools located in low-income areas so that every child has a chance to receive a good education. We need to protect the next generation and provide every opportunity we can to help them learn and become better members of society. There needs to be more done for students to better their education and teach them what they need to provide for their future. There needs to be more evaluation of the moral problems that arise from the lack of funding in education. Such moral problems as, is it right that our children should suffer from underfunding of schools and understaffing of teachers? Is it right that funding for education is drastically different dependent on the income level of where the public school is located? Is it right that it is up to each state how much funding is allocated to public education? These moral problems are only becoming worse over time. They need to be addressed, and steps need to be taken to help minimize them.
It is in the best interest of society to invest in children's education so that we can reduce poverty, social costs, and promote long-term economic growth. The cost to fund education may seem high in the short term, but in the long term, it will reduce the number of special needs and remedial programs, offer better health outcomes, reduce the need for social services, lower crime, and increase self-sufficiency and productivity. By turning a blind eye to the inequality of childhood education within our communities, we as a society are demonstrating a lack of overall personal virtue. And by refusing to provide sufficient funds to children, we exploit and diminish the opportunities for the least among us to get an education. A lacking education system is not kind or compassionate towards our students, teachers, or society as a whole. The current trajectory has teachers pitted against taxpayers, with children caught in the middle. This is no way to build a sense of community. One would hope that our common goal is a well-educated, cohesive country. The simplest of standards, the golden rule, does not appear to be adhered to. Should prosperous communities ignore the needs of neighboring communities, struggling with the lack of funding? Or should our children be treated with respect and kindness, knowing that they are our future? Federal laws are needed to ensure that children across the United States receive a consistent and quality education, regardless of where they live, although the federal government does not have oversight responsibilities. Laws like the Education and Secondary Education Act of 1965 and Every Student Succeeds Act have been enacted to provide states with additional funding. By not providing a consistent and quality education, we are not providing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. In fact, we are hurting future generations.
Another ethical duty to consider is universal rules. No one wants to see their own children suffer and be denied opportunities due to a lack of a quality education. Why should we allow other people's children to have to suffer? Another consideration is distributive justice. The least among us, including poor and minority children, are most affected by the lack of educational funding. The poor and uneducated need to be protected and given the same social and economic opportunities as others. Finally, our last ethical duty to consider is contributive liberty. The lack of funding for education interferes with the rights of the least among us to self-develop and self-improve. Due to inadequate funding for education, we are depriving children of the opportunity to learn and grow and to gain the knowledge and skills needed to improve their lives and be productive members of society. Poor and minority children face so many burdens in society. Can we not help lighten their load by giving them equal opportunity in receiving a quality education? What is the ethical solution? From our perspective, states should change their funding allocation formulas to redistribute funds for education more equitably. The federal government should increase funding of education to supplement state budgets to ensure all students have access to fair and equitable education. This includes increased funding to Title I schools and continued funding of programs like this National School Lunch Program, which feeds children who would otherwise go hungry. Community members should be involved and vote for representatives who will invest in our future through the funding of education. In the end, educating our children is the responsibility of us all. We all have a stake in the outcome.